The dust clung to Violet Sinclair's boots as he rode into Los Alamos, New Mexico, with nothing but his horse, his worn saddlebags, and a heart as empty as the canteen at his side. The year was 1882, and the October sun beat down mercilessly on the small mining town nestled in the high desert, its rays reflecting off the adobe buildings that lined the dirt main street. He had been riding for 3 weeks straight, leaving behind a ranch in Colorado that no longer felt like home after his father's death and his brother's betrayal over the inheritance. At 26 years old, Violet figured he had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by starting fresh somewhere nobody knew his name or his failures. He guided his chestnut mare toward the livery stable, his eyes scanning the dusty street with the practiced caution of a man who had learned that trouble could appear from any direction. The town seemed quiet enough, with a few miners heading toward the saloon and a handful of women carrying baskets from the general store. That was when he saw her, standing near the entrance of the mercantile with her back pressed against the wall as though she were trying to disappear into the adobe itself. She was Chinese, her black hair pulled back severely from a face that might have been pretty if it were not so gaunt and pale. Her dress was faded calico, patched in several places, and hung loosely on a frame that spoke of prolonged hunger. What caught Violet's attention most, however, was the desperate look in her dark eyes as she watched each person who passed, her thin hand clutching something small that glinted in the sunlight. Violet dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, pretending to adjust his saddle while he watched her from the corner of his eye. A well-dressed man in a suit walked past, and the woman stepped forward hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying a refined accent that surprised Violet. "I have not eaten in days. Will you buy my ring?" She held out her hand, revealing a delicate gold band with a small jade stone set in the center. It was clearly valuable, probably worth far more than a few meals, and Violet saw the pain in her eyes as she offered it up. The man looked at her with a mixture of disgust and dismissal. "I do not buy jewelry from Celestials," he said coldly, using the derogatory term that made Violet's jaw tighten. "Especially not stolen goods." "It is not stolen," the woman protested, her voice stronger now despite the tremor running through it. "It belonged to my husband. He is dead, and I have nothing else." "Not my problem," the man said, pushing past her roughly enough that she stumbled backward. Violet found himself moving before he had consciously decided to do so. He crossed the street in long strides, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The woman had pressed herself back against the wall again, her eyes closed as though gathering strength for the next attempt. When she opened them and saw Violet approaching, fear flickered across her features. "I am not looking for trouble," she said quickly, holding up one hand while the other kept the ring clutched protectively. "Neither am I," Violet said, stopping a respectful distance away. Up close, he could see just how thin she was, her cheekbones sharp beneath skin that had taken on an unhealthy pallor. "But I heard what you said about not eating. That true?" She hesitated, clearly weighing whether honesty would help or hurt her cause. 3 days, she finally admitted. "Maybe 4. I have lost track." Violet felt something twist in his chest. He knew what it was like to be hungry, to feel that gnawing emptiness that made everything else fade into insignificance. During the war, when he had been just a boy, he had gone days without proper food. The memory of it never quite left you. "Let me see the ring," he said, holding out his hand. The woman's fingers tightened around it instinctively, but after a moment she slowly uncurled her hand and placed the small piece of jewelry in his palm. Violet held it up to the light, examining it carefully. The gold was real, the craftsmanship exquisite, and the jade stone was a deep, rich green that spoke of quality. He had no doubt that this ring represented something far more valuable than its monetary worth to this woman. "This was your husband's?" he asked. "His grandmother's," she corrected softly. "He gave it to me on our wedding day. It is the only thing I have left of him, of my life before." Violet looked from the ring to her face, seeing the tears she was fighting to hold back. Every instinct told him that selling this ring would destroy something inside her, that she had reached the absolute end of her rope to even consider parting with it. "What is your name?" he asked. "Bai Jing," she said after a pause. "But the people here cannot pronounce it properly, so some call me just Bai." "I am Violet Sinclair," he said, closing his hand around the ring. "And I am not going to buy your ring, Bai." The hope that had begun to kindle in her eyes died instantly, replaced by a devastation so complete that Violet quickly continued before she could turn away. "I am not going to buy it because you should not have to sell it," he said. "But I will buy you dinner, and we can talk about what you need." Bai stared at him as though he had spoken in a foreign language. "I do not understand," she said slowly. "Why would you do that?" "Because I have been hungry before, and I would not wish it on anyone," Violet said simply. He held the ring back out to her. "Take this back, keep it safe. And come with me to the restaurant." "There is no restaurant in Los Alamos that will serve me," Bai said, but she took the ring back, her fingers brushing against his palm for just a moment. "The Chinese are not welcome in most places." Violet felt a fresh surge of anger at the injustice of it, but he kept his voice level. "Then we will go to the hotel dining room. I am staying there, and they will serve anyone I bring as my guest." "You are staying at the hotel?" Bai asked, surprise evident in her voice. "You must be wealthy." Violet laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Far from it. But I sold my share of cattle before I left Colorado, and I have enough to get by for a while until I find work. Come on. You look like you are about to fall over." It was true. Now that the desperate energy that had kept her standing was fading, Bai was swaying slightly, her hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. Violet moved closer instinctively, offering his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. He could feel how much she was trembling, how little strength she had left. They walked slowly toward the hotel, Violet acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. A white man walking arm in arm with a Chinese woman was evidently scandalous enough to warrant whispers and pointing. Violet ignored it all, keeping his attention on Bai, who was concentrating hard on putting one foot in front of the other. The hotel was the largest building in Los Alamos, a two-story structure with a wraparound porch and actual glass windows. Violet had chosen it precisely because it seemed like the kind of establishment that would have standards and not tolerate the rougher elements that frequented the saloons. Now he was grateful for that choice as he guided Bai through the front door and into the dining room. The owner, a portly man named Chester Williams, looked up from behind the front desk, and his eyebrows rose dramatically when he saw Bai. "Mr. Sinclair," he said carefully, "I am not sure this is appropriate, Mrs. Jing is my guest," Violet said firmly, using the more formal address deliberately. "I trust that will not be a problem, given that I paid for a week in advance." Chester's eyes shifted between them, clearly calculating the cost of refusing versus the potential loss of business. "Of course not," he said after a pause that went on just a beat too long. "Please, seat yourselves wherever you like." The dining room was half empty, which Violet considered fortunate. He led Bai to a table near the window, pulling out a chair for her. She sank into it with a barely suppressed sigh of relief, her eyes closing briefly. "When was the last time you had water?" Violet asked, realizing that she was probably dehydrated as well as hungry. "This morning from the well," Bai said. "I have water. It is food that I lack." A young woman in a crisp white apron appeared at their table, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw Bai. "What can I get for you?" she asked, addressing the question solely to Violet. "We will both have the beef stew, fresh bread, and whatever vegetables you have," Violet said. "And coffee and water." "Right away, sir," the girl said, hurrying off. Violet turned his attention back to Bai, who was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "I am no one to you." "You are someone who needs help," Violet said. "That is enough." "Most people do not see it that way," Bai said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "Especially not when it comes to Chinese people. We are blamed for taking jobs, for being different, for existing." Violet nodded slowly. "I know, and it is wrong. My father always said that judging a person by where they came from instead of who they are is the mark of a small mind." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man," Bai said. "He was," Violet agreed, feeling the familiar ache of loss. "He died 3 months ago. That is why I am here, actually." "Needed a fresh start." "I am sorry for your loss," Bai said softly. "Losing someone you love is like losing a piece of yourself." "You understand that," Violet observed. "Your husband," Bai's hand went instinctively to the pocket where she had tucked the ring. "Yes. Why died 6 months ago?" "There was an accident at the mine where he worked. A tunnel collapsed. They did not even try very hard to dig out the Chinese workers. By the time they reached Y and the others, it was too late." The pain in her voice was raw and immediate, and Violet felt his own throat tighten in sympathy. "I am sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate but meaning them nonetheless. "After he died, the company would not pay me anything," Bai continued, the words seeming to pour out of her now that she had started. "They said Y had not worked there long enough to qualify for death benefits. His friends at the mine tried to help, but they have so little themselves. I had a small amount of savings, but it ran out. I tried to find work, but no one will hire me. Some men offered me work, but not the kind I could accept." Violet understood the implication and felt a fresh surge of anger. "How have you been surviving?" "I have not been, clearly," Bai said with a ghost of a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I have been sleeping in an abandoned shed near the edge of town. I sold everything else I owned, piece by piece. The ring was the last thing, and I could not bring myself to part with it until I realized I might actually die if I did not." The food arrived then, and Violet watched as Bai stared at the steaming bowl of stew as though it were a mirage that might disappear if she reached for it. "Go ahead," he said gently. "Eat." She picked up the spoon with a hand that shook slightly and brought it to her lips. Violet saw her close her eyes as she swallowed, a single tear sliding down her cheek. He looked away, giving her privacy in the moment, and focused on his own meal. They ate in silence for several minutes. Violet made sure to pace himself, knowing that Bai should not eat too quickly after days without food, but not wanting to embarrass her by saying so. She seemed to understand instinctively, taking small bites and pausing between them, though he could see the effort it took for her to restrain herself. "Tell me about your husband," Violet said after a while, wanting to distract her and also genuinely curious. "How did you meet?" Bai's expression softened, the hard edges of desperation easing slightly. "In San Francisco," she said. "My family came to America when I was 16. My father heard there was gold in the mountains and opportunities everywhere. We were very naive. The reality was much harsher than the stories we had been told." "Most things are," Violet agreed. Y's family had been here longer. He worked as a translator and helped new immigrants navigate this confusing country. He helped my family find housing, explained the strange customs, taught us survival English. He was so patient and kind. I fell in love with him slowly, like water wearing down stone. Not dramatic, but inevitable. Violet found himself smiling at her description. How old were you when you married? 18, Bai said. Y was 21. My parents approved because he had steady work and came from a good family. We were happy, even though life was hard. We moved here to New Mexico 2 years ago because Y heard the mines were hiring. We thought we could save money, maybe eventually buy a piece of land, start a small business. We had dreams. The past tense hung heavy in the air between them. Violet wanted to say something comforting but could not find words that would not sound hollow, so instead he asked, "What kind of business?" "A restaurant," Bai said, and for the first time, a genuine smile crossed her face. "Y loved to eat and I love to cook. We thought we could combine Chinese and American food, create something new. I know it sounds foolish." "It does not sound foolish at all," Violet said firmly. "It sounds ambitious and creative. The world needs more people with vision like that." Bai looked at him with those dark eyes that were beginning to show sparks of life now that food was reaching her system. "You are very kind, Violet Sinclair, suspiciously kind. What do you want from me?" The blunt question surprised a laugh out of Violet. "Nothing," he said honestly. "I am just trying to do the right thing." "In my experience, men always want something," Bai said, her voice careful but not accusatory. "I suppose that is fair," Violet acknowledged. "But I promise you, I have no ulterior motives. I am just a man who saw someone in trouble and decided to help." Nothing more complicated than that. Bai studied him for a long moment, and Violet had the sense that she was seeing far more than he intended to show. "You are lonely," she said finally. "That is why you stopped, not just kindness, loneliness." The observation hit closer to home than Violet was comfortable with, but he did not deny it. "Maybe," he admitted. "I have been on my own for a while now. It gets quiet inside your own head after a time." "Yes," Bai said softly. "Yes, it does." They finished their meal in a more comfortable silence, and when the plates were cleared, Violet ordered pie and more coffee. Bai protested, saying it was too much, but he insisted, and she was not really in a position to argue. As they ate the pie, a surprisingly good apple concoction with a flaky crust, Violet found himself thinking about what came next. "You cannot keep sleeping in a shed," he said finally. "It is October now, but winter will come soon enough and the nights will get cold." "I know," Bai said quietly. "I have been trying not to think about it." "Where is your family now? You mentioned your parents." "Still in San Francisco, I think," Bai said. "I have not heard from them in over a year. We exchanged letters for a while, but then they stopped responding. I do not know if something happened, or if they simply decided I was no longer their daughter for marrying Y without going through a proper matchmaker." Violet heard the hurt beneath the matter-of-fact tone. "You could go back there," he suggested. "San Francisco is big enough that you might find work, even if your family will not help." "I have no money for train fare," Bai pointed out. "And San Francisco is even more hostile to Chinese people now than when I left. There was a riot a few years ago. People were killed." "No, I think I am stuck here, at least for now." "Then we need to find you proper housing and a way to earn money," Violet said, speaking as though it were already decided that he would help her. Perhaps it was. He had never been good at walking away from people in need, a trait his father had encouraged and his brother had mocked as weakness. "That is easier said than done," Bai said. "As I told you, no one will hire me." "What skills do you have?" Violet asked. "Besides cooking, which you mentioned." "I can sew, though not as well as a professional seamstress," Bai said, considering. I can read and write in both Chinese and English. I can do basic mathematics. I can clean and do laundry. I know medicinal herbs, both Chinese and some that grow here. None of these things have been useful so far. Violet's mind was working through possibilities. The hotel needs staff, he said. I saw a sign saying they were looking for a laundry worker. They would not hire me, Bai said with certainty. Chester Williams is polite to your face because you are a paying customer, but I have heard him talk about Chinese people. He calls us yellow devils and worse things. What about starting your own business? Violet asked. Not a restaurant, that would take too much capital, but something smaller. Laundry services, maybe, or sewing repairs. I would need supplies, a location, customers willing to patronize a Chinese-owned business, Bai listed off. All things I do not have and cannot get. Violet frowned, frustrated by the barriers she faced simply because of her heritage. It was unjust, infuriating, and far too common. He had seen prejudice before, but experiencing it secondhand like this brought it into sharper focus. What if you had a partner? He asked slowly, an idea forming. Someone who could be the public face of the business while you did the actual work. Bai's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you suggesting a partnership between us? We only just met. I know it sounds strange, Violet admitted, but think about it practically. You need money and housing. I have some money but no particular plan for how to use it. You have skills that could be profitable with the right setup. I have a face that people around here will trust more than yours, unfair as that is. We could help each other. And what would you get out of this arrangement? Bai asked, her tone wary. Honest, a purpose, Violet said. I came here looking for a fresh start, but I did not really know what that meant. Maybe it means this: building something new with someone who needs a fresh start as badly as I do. Bai was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. This is very unusual, she said finally. People would talk. Let them talk, Violet said. I stopped caring what people thought about me the day my brother accused me of stealing from our dead father and ran me off the ranch that should have been half mine. Is that what happened? Bai asked softly. That is terrible. It was, Violet agreed. But it taught me something important. The opinions of small-minded people do not matter. What matters is being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing. You are an idealist, Bai observed. That is rare, especially in a place like this. Maybe, Violet said. Or maybe I am just stubborn. My father always said it was a fine line between the two. For the first time since he had met her, Bai laughed, a soft sound that transformed her face entirely. She looked younger, lighter, like the weight of the world had lifted just slightly off her shoulders. I think I would have liked your father, she said. He would have liked you too, Violet said, and realized he meant it. His father had always respected people who worked hard and persevered despite difficult circumstances. Bai clearly embodied both those qualities. So what exactly are you proposing? Bai asked, leaning forward slightly. Be specific. Violet thought it through carefully before answering. We find a small space that can serve as both a shop and living quarters. Maybe one of those buildings on the edge of town that are sitting empty. We set up a laundry and sewing repair business. I handle the customer interactions and money. You do the actual work since you are better at it than I would be. We split the profits 50-50 after expenses. You get a safe place to live, steady income, and a partner who will not cheat you. I get a business and a friend. How does that sound? Too good to be true, Bai said bluntly. Forgive me, but I have learned to be suspicious of generous offers. Smart, Violet acknowledged. But I am serious about this. Give me a chance to prove it. Stay at the hotel tonight in your own room. Tomorrow we can start looking for a suitable location. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to back out, you can. No pressure, no obligations beyond giving this a fair try. Bai looked at him for a long moment, and Violet had the sense that she was taking his measure, weighing his sincerity against her experience and instincts. "One night at the hotel will cost you significantly," she said. "I do not want you to waste your money if I decide this is not wise." "Let me worry about my money," Violet said. "What do you say? Will you at least consider it?" Another long pause, and then Bai nodded slowly. "I will consider it, and I will accept your offer of a room tonight because the alternative is that shed, and I am very tired of being cold and afraid." "Good," Violet said, relief washing through him. He had not realized how much he wanted her to say yes until she did. "Let me arrange it with Chester." He stood and made his way to the front desk, where Chester was reviewing a ledger. "I need to book another room," Violet said. "For tonight at least, possibly longer." Chester looked past him to where Bai still sat at the table. "For her?" he asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "For Mrs. Jing, yes," Violet said, keeping his voice level despite the irritation he felt. "Is that a problem?" "It is just unusual," Chester said carefully. "People will talk." "Let them," Violet said, echoing what he had told Bai. "How much for the room?" Chester quoted a price that Violet suspected was inflated, but he paid it without complaint, not wanting to create a scene. He took the key and returned to the table, where Bai had been watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. "Room 12, upstairs," Violet said, handing her the key. "It is yours for tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest." Bai took the key with a hand that trembled slightly. "Thank you," she said, and the depth of emotion in those two words made Violet look away, suddenly feeling awkward. "Get some rest," he said. "You look exhausted." "I am," Bai admitted. "More tired than I knew. Thank you, Violet, for everything." "I do not understand why you are doing this, but I am grateful." "You are welcome," Violet said. "My room is number 7 if you need anything." Bai nodded and stood, swaying slightly before catching herself on the back of the chair. Violet resisted the urge to help her, sensing she needed to do this part on her own. He watched as she walked slowly toward the stairs, her spine straight despite her obvious exhaustion, and felt something shift inside his chest that he could not quite name. The next morning, Violet woke early out of habit and made his way downstairs to the dining room, hoping Bai would appear. He was on his second cup of coffee when she finally did, looking better than she had the previous day, but still far too thin. She had clearly washed her hair, which now hung in a neat braid down her back, and her dress, while still worn, was clean. "Good morning," Violet said, standing as she approached the table. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Bai admitted, sitting down. "I had forgotten what a real bed felt like. I almost cried when I lay down." "I am glad," Violet said. "Are you hungry?" "Always," Bai said with a small smile. "It will take time before my body trusts that food will keep coming." They ordered breakfast, and as they ate, Violet outlined his plan for the day. "I thought we could walk around town, look at empty buildings, get a sense of what might work," he said. "And we should probably visit the general store, see what supplies would cost for starting a laundry business." "You are serious about this," Bai said, studying him over her coffee cup. "I told you I was," Violet said. "I do not make offers I do not intend to follow through on." "I believe you," Bai said slowly, "which is strange because I should not, but I do." After breakfast, they set out into the cool October morning. Los Alamos was coming to life around them, with miners heading toward the hills, shopkeepers opening their doors, and children running through the streets on their way to the schoolhouse. Violet was acutely aware of the stares they attracted, the way conversation stopped when they passed, but he kept his head high, and his hand lightly touching Bai's elbow as they walked. They found 3 empty buildings on the first pass through town. The first was far too large and expensive, clearly meant for something more ambitious than a laundry service. The second was in terrible repair, with a roof that looked ready to collapse, and windows so broken they were just jagged holes. But the third was promising. It was a small adobe building on the eastern edge of town, with 2 rooms and a back area that could serve for washing. The front room had a large window that would let in good light, and the back room was big enough for sleeping and storage. Best of all, it was far enough from the main street that the noise and dust would be less intrusive, but close enough that customers could easily find them. "It is perfect," Bai said softly, peering through the grimy window. "Or it could be with work." "Let us find out who owns it," Violet said. That information led them to a lawyer named Harrison Tucker, whose office was above the bank. Tucker was a thin man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and a shrewd expression. He listened to Violet's inquiry about the property with interest. "That building has been empty for 2 years," Tucker said. "Previous owner died, left no heirs. It reverted to the territory and I have been handling the sale. You interested in buying or leasing?" "Leasing, at least initially," Violet said. "What are the terms?" Tucker named a price that was higher than Violet had hoped but not unreasonable. "And who would the lease be under?" Tucker asked, his eyes flicking to Bai, who stood slightly behind Violet. "Both of us," Violet said firmly. "This would be a partnership." Tucker's eyebrows rose. "A partnership between you and a Chinese woman? That is highly irregular." "But not illegal," Violet pointed out. "Is it?" "No, not illegal," Tucker admitted. "Just unusual. People might not take kindly to it." "That is their problem, not ours," Violet said. "Can you draw up the lease papers?" Tucker hesitated, then shrugged. "Your funeral," he said. "I will have the papers ready by tomorrow. You will need to put down the first month's rent plus a deposit." "That is fine," Violet said, though he mentally calculated how much of his savings it would eat into. He still had enough to cover startup costs, but not by much. This was definitely a gamble. Outside Tucker's office, Bai turned to him with worry clear on her face. "This is too much," she said. "You are spending too much of your money on someone you barely know." "I am investing in a business," Violet corrected. "One that I think can be successful." "You heard what Tucker said. That building has been empty for 2 years. Nobody else wants it, which means we are giving it a purpose. And we are creating something that can support us both. That is not charity, Bai. That is smart business." "You have more faith in this than I do," Bai said. "Then have faith in me for now," Violet said. "Your faith in yourself will come back. It just needs time and proof." They spent the rest of the day at the general store pricing out supplies. They would need a large washtub, soap, washboards, clotheslines, irons, and countless other items. Bai proved to be an excellent bargainer, politely but firmly negotiating prices with the store owner, who seemed surprised but impressed by her knowledge. "We can start small," Bai said as they walked back to the hotel with a list of purchases. "Just basic laundry services at first. Once we have steady income, we can expand to sewing repairs and alterations." "What about your idea for combining Chinese and American cooking?" Violet asked. "Is that completely off the table?" Bai smiled sadly. "For now, yes. That was Wai's dream as much as mine. It feels wrong to pursue it without him." "I understand," Violet said. "But maybe someday, when you are ready, we could revisit it. I meant what I said. It is a good idea." Over the next week, they worked harder than Violet had worked in his entire life. They cleaned the building from top to bottom, scrubbing away years of dust and neglect. They patched holes in the walls, replaced broken boards, and installed proper locks on the doors. They bought supplies, set up the wash area, and hung a simple sign that read Sinclair Laundry and Repairs. Violet insisted on Sinclair rather than Sinclair and Jing, because Bai pointed out that her name on the sign would drive away more customers than it attracted. It galled him to admit she was right, but he could not argue with the logic. Bai proved to be a tireless worker, attacking each task with focus and determination. Violet found himself watching her sometimes, noticing the way her face lit up when they completed a project, or how she hummed quietly to herself when she thought he could not hear. She had a beautiful voice, clear and pure, and he wondered if she had ever sung properly, or if it was just something she did without thinking. They settled into an easy routine. They both slept in the back room of the shop, with a curtain strung across the middle for privacy. It was not ideal, but it was temporary until they could afford separate accommodations, and they were both too practical to waste money on two places when one would do. Violet found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. Bai was quiet but not shy, thoughtful but not withdrawn. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard sometimes, making him laugh when he least expected it. And she was smart, solving problems with a creativity that impressed him. Their first customer arrived on a cold morning in late October. He was a miner, gruff and suspicious, who thrust a bundle of dirty clothes at Violet and asked how much it would cost to get them cleaned. 50 cents for the lot, Violet said, which was the price they had agreed upon after researching what other laundries in the area charged. That is robbery, the miner complained. Old Joe used to charge 35. Old Joe also used to return your clothes just as dirty as when you brought them in, Violet pointed out, which he had heard from several sources. We guarantee they will be actually clean, or you do not pay. The miner grumbled but handed over the clothes and the money. Ready by Saturday, he said. Ready by Friday, Violet promised. The miner left and Violet turned to find Bai watching him with a smile. You are good at this, she said. At what? Dealing with people. Making them feel heard even when you are not giving them what they want. My father taught me that, Violet said. He said that most folks just want to feel like their opinion matters, even if you end up doing what you planned all along. Your father was very wise, Bai said, taking the bundle of clothes from him. Now let me show you what actually clean clothes look like. Word spread slowly but surely. The miner came back for his clothes and was so impressed with the quality that he told his friends. A woman brought in curtains that needed washing and asked if they could also repair a torn seam. Bai said yes, and did the work so expertly that the woman returned with more sewing jobs. By mid-November, they had a steady stream of customers and were making enough money to cover their expenses with a small profit left over. It was not much, but it was progress, and both Violet and Bai felt the satisfaction of building something real. One evening, after they had closed the shop and eaten a simple dinner, Violet found Bai standing at the window, looking out at the darkening sky. She had been quieter than usual all day, and he wondered if something was wrong. Are you all right? He asked, joining her at the window. I was just thinking about why, Bai said softly. Today would have been his 26th birthday. He should be here, alive and celebrating. Instead, I am here with a stranger, building a life he will never be part of. Violet felt the weight of her grief and chose his words carefully. I cannot imagine what that is like, he said, but I do not think he would want you to feel guilty for surviving, for moving forward. I know that logically, Bai said, but grief is not logical. It ambushes you at strange moments. I can go days feeling almost normal, and then suddenly something will remind me, and it is like the wound is fresh again. My mother died when I was 12, Violet said. Cholera. For years after, I would forget sometimes and set a place for her at dinner. It got better eventually, but the missing never completely goes away. You just learn to carry it differently. Bai turned to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You understand, she said. That helps, knowing you understand. I am glad, Violet said. He wanted to reach out and comfort her, but was not sure if that would be welcome, so he kept his hands at his sides. May I tell you about him? Bai asked. About why? I have not talked about him to anyone in so long. Everyone here either did not know him or did not care. I am afraid I will forget things if I do not say them out loud. I would like to hear about him, Violet said honestly. They sat at the small table and Bai talked for hours. She told him about Y's laugh, which was loud and infectious, about his terrible singing voice and his love of chess, about how he would leave her little notes in unexpected places, just to make her smile, about his fierce protectiveness of his family and friends, and his dream of making enough money to bring his parents to America so they could live comfortably in their old age. Violet listened, asking questions when appropriate but mostly just giving her space to remember and grieve. As she talked, he found himself mourning for this man he had never met, this person who had clearly been loved deeply and died too young. Thank you, Bai said finally, wiping her eyes. For listening, for not telling me to move on or that it has been long enough. People do not understand that grief does not have a schedule. No, it does not, Violet agreed, and you are welcome. Anytime you want to talk about him, I am here. Bai looked at him with an expression that made Violet's heart do something strange in his chest. You are a good man, Violet Sinclair, she said softly. I am glad fate brought you to Los Alamos. I am glad too, Violet said, and meant it more than he could express. As November turned to December, the temperature dropped and the work became harder. Washing clothes in icy water left Bai's hands red and chapped, and Violet insisted on doing more of it himself, though his efforts were clumsy compared to hers. They bought a small stove for the shop, which helped but also ate into their profits. Despite the challenges, Violet found himself happier than he had been in years. There was something deeply satisfying about the rhythm of their days, the shared work and shared meals and easy conversation that had developed between them. He liked hearing Bai's humming as she sewed, liked the way she rolled her eyes when he made a bad joke, liked the rare moments when she laughed freely. He was also, if he was honest with himself, beginning to feel things for her that went beyond friendship. It was not something he had planned or wanted. He knew Bai was still grieving her husband, and the last thing she needed was the complication of someone developing romantic feelings for her. But he could not help noticing the graceful way she moved, or the intelligence that shone in her dark eyes, or the quiet strength she displayed every single day. Christmas came, and with it, a small celebration. Violet bought a chicken from the butcher, and Bai cooked it with herbs and spices that made his mouth water. They exchanged small gifts. He gave her a pair of sturdy work gloves to protect her hands, and she gave him a handkerchief she had embroidered with his initials. This is too fine, Violet protested, running his fingers over the delicate stitching. You could sell this for good money. I made it for you, Bai said firmly. It is not for sale. Consider it payment for everything you have done for me. You do not owe me payment, Violet said. We are partners, remember? Equal. Partners, Bai agreed, but the way she looked at him made Violet wonder if she too was beginning to feel the shift in their relationship. The new year of 1883 arrived with a cold snap that froze the water in the wash basin and made every breath visible in the air. Business slowed as people hunkered down to wait out the worst of the winter, but Violet and Bai used the quieter time to work on expanding their services. Bai taught Violet how to do basic mending, and though his stitches were never as neat as hers, he became competent enough to handle simple repairs. In return, Violet taught her how to manage the books and deal with difficult customers, skills that increased her confidence. "I never thanked you properly," Bai said one snowy evening as they sat by the stove, working on separate projects. "For what?" Violet asked, looking up from the shirt he was attempting to patch. "For seeing me as a person, not just a Chinese woman or a widow or someone desperate," Bai said. "For treating me like an equal. For building this partnership and not taking advantage of the power you could have had over me." Violet felt his throat tighten. "You do not have to thank me for basic human decency," he said. "But I do," Bai insisted. "Because basic human decency is not so common, especially in a place like this. You gave me back my dignity when I thought I had lost it forever. That is worth more than gold." "You never lost your dignity," Violet said firmly. "Circumstances tried to take it from you, but it was always there. I just helped you remember it." Bai set down her sewing and looked at him with an intensity that made him suddenly nervous. "I need to tell you something," she said. "All right," Violet said, bracing himself for bad news. "I am developing feelings for you," Bai said bluntly, her directness a trait he had come to appreciate. "I did not plan to. I did not want to. I feel guilty about it because Y has only been gone 8 months and I loved him very much. But I cannot deny what is happening. You have become important to me in ways I did not expect." Violet felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Bai," he started, then stopped, not sure what to say. "You do not have to say anything," Bai said quickly. "I am not asking for anything, I just needed to be honest. I have been carrying this around for weeks, and it was becoming too heavy." "I am glad you told me," Violet said slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs, "because I have been feeling the same way. I have been fighting it because I did not want to make you uncomfortable or ruin our partnership or take advantage of your vulnerability. But the truth is, I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably wise." Bai's eyes widened slightly. "Really, really," Violet confirmed. "I did not come to Los Alamos looking for love. I thought that part of my life was over before it really started. But then you asked me to buy your ring and something changed. I cannot explain it better than that." "I do not need better explanations," Bai said. "I just need to know I am not alone in this feeling." "You are not alone," Violet said firmly. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their confessions hanging in the air between them. Finally, Bai spoke again. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I do not know," Violet admitted. "What do you want to do?" "I want to be honest about what is happening between us," Bai said. "But I am not ready for anything more than that yet. I need time." "Is that all right?" "Of course it is all right," Violet said. "There is no rush, no pressure. We have time to figure this out together." "Together," Bai repeated softly and smiled. From that night on, something shifted between them. It was not dramatic. They still worked side by side, still shared meals and conversation, but there was an awareness now, an acknowledgement of the connection growing between them. Violet found himself noticing small things he had missed before. The way Bai's face softened when she looked at him, or how she always made sure his coffee was exactly the way he liked it, or the way her hand would brush against his just a moment longer than necessary when passing something between them. February brought a brief thaw, and with it, an increase in business. They were busier than ever, which was good for their finances but exhausting for both of them. One particularly long day, Violet found Bai asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms, still holding a needle and thread. He stood there for a moment, just watching her sleep, feeling a surge of protectiveness so strong it almost scared him. Then he gently removed the sewing from her hands, lifted her carefully, and carried her to her bed. She stirred but did not wake, and he covered her with a blanket before returning to the front room to finish closing up the shop. The next morning, Bai did not mention the incident, but she looked at him with such warmth that Violet knew she remembered, or at least suspected what had happened. "We need help," she said over breakfast. "We are both working too hard. If we could hire someone, even part-time, it would make a significant difference." "Who would we hire?" Violet asked. "Most people in town still look at us sideways for being partners. I doubt anyone would want to work for us." "There is a woman who comes in sometimes with washing," Bai said thoughtfully. "Her name is Margaret. She is a widow and she mentioned needing work. She was kind to me, did not treat me like I was less than human. Maybe we could ask her." Margaret Reed turned out to be an excellent addition to their small business. She was in her 40s, practical and hard-working, and grateful for the steady employment. With her help, the workload became manageable again, and Violet and Bai had more time to breathe. It was on one of those slightly less frantic days in early March that Violet finally gathered the courage to ask Bai if she would take a walk with him. Not for business purposes, not to run errands, but just to walk together and talk, like a courtship walk. Bai asked, a small smile playing at her lips. "If you want to call it that," Violet said, feeling suddenly like a nervous boy instead of a grown man. "I just want to spend time with you away from work." "I would like that," Bai said. They walked out of town toward the hills, where the first wildflowers of spring were beginning to bloom. The air was cool but pleasant, and the sky was that brilliant blue that seemed unique to New Mexico. They talked about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, the things they missed about their old lives and the things they did not miss at all. "I never thought I would be happy again," Bai admitted as they sat on a flat rock, looking out over the valley. "After Y died, I could not imagine a future that did not feel like punishment. But being with you, building this business, it has shown me that life can still have good things, even after terrible loss." "I feel the same way," Violet said. "Losing my father and my brother's betrayal broke something in me. Coming here, meeting you, it has started to heal that break. You have given me purpose again." Bai turned to look at him, and in her eyes, Violet saw everything he was feeling reflected back at him. "I am ready," she said softly. "Ready for what?" Violet asked, though he thought he knew. "To try this," Bai said, gesturing between them. "Us. I will always love Y, always miss him. That will never change. But I am learning that the heart is bigger than I thought. There is room for grief and for new love at the same time." Violet felt like his heart might burst. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I do not want to rush you, I am sure," Bai said. "I have been sure for weeks now. I was just afraid to admit it." Slowly, carefully, Violet reached out and took her hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, small and work-worn but strong. They sat like that for a long time, just holding hands and watching the sun move across the sky, and Violet thought it was one of the most perfect moments of his life. Their courtship was unconventional by most standards. They already lived and worked together, already knew each other's habits and quirks. But they made space for romance anyway, walks after closing the shop, small gifts left for each other to find, stolen moments of privacy in their busy days. Violet learned that Bai loved poetry, particularly the works of Lai Bai, whom she had been named after. She taught him some Chinese phrases, laughing at his terrible pronunciation. In return, he taught her to play chess, which she picked up so quickly that within a month she was beating him regularly. The people of Los Alamos remained largely hostile to their relationship. There were whispers and pointed comments, and one particularly ugly incident where someone threw garbage at Bai while they were walking together. Violet had wanted to find the culprit and make them pay, but Bai stopped him. "It will only make things worse," she said. "Let it go." Their hatred says more about them than it does about us. But not everyone was hostile. Margaret became a friend as well as an employee, defending Violet and Bai fiercely to anyone who spoke ill of them. A few other people in town, mostly those who had used their services and appreciated the quality of their work, showed quiet support. By May, the business was thriving, and Violet and Bai had enough saved to begin thinking about the future. One warm evening, Violet took Bai back to the spot where they had first held hands and asked her to marry him. "I do not have a fancy ring," he said, "and I know people will make our lives difficult because of who we are, but I love you, Bai Jing. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. Will you marry me?" Bai's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They kissed for the first time then, and Violet felt like he was falling and flying at the same time. Bai tasted like the tea she favored and something uniquely her, and Violet knew with absolute certainty that this was right, that she was the person he was meant to find. Finding someone to marry them proved challenging. The local preacher refused, citing concerns about interracial marriage and the moral implications. Violet was furious, but Bai remained calm. "We will find another way," she said. "Love does not need a church's blessing to be real." They eventually found a justice of the peace in a town 30 miles away who was willing to perform the ceremony. They made the trip with Margaret as their witness, and on a sunny day in early June, Violet Sinclair and Bai Jing became husband and wife. The ceremony was simple, just words and signatures, but it felt momentous to Violet. When the justice of the peace pronounced them married, Violet kissed his bride and felt like the luckiest man alive. They returned to Los Alamos as a married couple and faced the predictable backlash with united strength. Some customers stopped coming, muttering about moral decay and the degradation of society. But others remained, and new customers came too, people who respected what Violet and Bai had built together. "We will be all right," Bai said one night as they lay in bed, finally sharing space without a curtain between them. "As long as we have each other, we will survive anything." "More than survive," Violet said, pulling her closer. "We will thrive." And they did. Over the next year, the business continued to grow. They hired another worker, a young Chinese man named Chen who had been struggling to find employment. With the extra help, they were able to expand into the cooking venture that Bai and Y had once dreamed about. It started small, just a few prepared meals that Bai would sell from the front of the shop. But word spread quickly about the unique flavors and high quality of the food, and soon they had regular customers asking for specific dishes. Y would be proud, Bai said one evening as she surveyed the kitchen area they had set up in a space adjacent to the laundry. "This was his dream, and I am making it real." "You are making it real," Violet corrected gently. "But I think you are right. I think he would be proud." Bai had come to terms with her grief and her new happiness, understanding that one did not diminish the other. She kept Y's ring in a small box on the shelf, a reminder of her first love and the life they had shared. But she wore Violet's ring on her finger, a simple silver band he had bought with his first profits from their restaurant expansion. By the summer of 1884, they were successful enough to buy a small house on the outskirts of town. It had a garden where Bai could grow herbs and vegetables, and a porch where they would sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over the desert hills. "You remember the day we met?" Violet asked one such evening, his arm around Bai's shoulders. "How could I forget?" Bai said, leaning into him. "I was convinced I was going to die. I had nothing left, no hope, no future. And then you stopped." "I almost did not," Violet admitted. "I was so focused on my own problems, my own pain. But something made me look at you, really look, and I could not walk away." "I am glad you did not," Bai said softly. You saved my life that day, Violet, not just from starvation but from despair. You gave me a reason to keep going. You saved mine too, Violet said. I just did not realize I needed saving until I met you. In the autumn of 1884, Bai discovered she was pregnant. They had not been trying, but they had not been preventing it either, and the news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. What if I am not a good mother? Bai worried. What if our child is hated because of what we are? Then we will teach our child to be strong like you, Violet said, and we will love them enough to make up for the hatred of small-minded people. Their daughter was born in May of 1885, a healthy baby with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything. They named her Rose because she had arrived with the spring flowers, and Violet thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Being parents was harder than either of them expected, but also more rewarding. Violet discovered a capacity for tenderness he had not known he possessed, and Bai bloomed into motherhood with a confidence that pleased him to see. The business continued to flourish. They eventually opened a proper restaurant, combining Chinese and American cuisine in ways that delighted their customers. It was everything Bai and Y had dreamed of, and Violet never felt jealous of that. He understood that he was helping her honor her first husband's memory while building a new life, and that felt right. By 1887, they had 3 employees, a thriving restaurant, and were expecting their second child. Violet sometimes had to pinch himself to believe this was his life, that the lonely, bitter man who had ridden into Los Alamos 5 years earlier had become this content, successful, deeply loved husband and father. What are you thinking about? Bai asked one evening, catching him staring into space with a smile on his face. Just how much has changed, Violet said. How different everything is from what I expected. Better or worse? Bai asked, though her smile suggested she knew the answer. Better, Violet said firmly. So much better. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Bai. You and Rose and this little one on the way. You are my whole world. Bai moved closer, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward but endearing. You are mine too, she said. I never thought I would love again after Y. I thought that door had closed forever. But you showed me that love is not finite, that the heart can always make more room. Thank you for that, Violet. Thank you for being patient and kind and exactly what I needed. Thank you for giving me a chance, Violet said. For trusting me when you had no reason to. For building this life with me. Their second child, a son they named Thomas, was born in early 1888. He had Violet's blue eyes and Bai's determination, and Violet loved him as fiercely as he loved Rose. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual milestones of family life. Rose learned to walk and then to talk, chattering constantly in a mix of English and the Chinese words Bai taught her. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious toddler who got into everything. The restaurant expanded again, requiring a larger space and more employees. There were still challenges. Prejudice did not disappear just because Violet and Bai were successful. There were still people who refused to eat at their restaurant or do business with them, still ugly comments and occasional acts of vandalism. But there were also friends, genuine friends who saw past race and circumstance to the good people Violet and Bai were. Margaret remained their most loyal supporter, becoming like family to them. Chen, who had started as just an employee, became a close friend and eventually a partner in the business. The community they built was small but strong, a collection of people who valued kindness and hard work over prejudice. In 1890, when Rose was 5 and Thomas was 2, Violet and Bai decided to take a trip to San Francisco. Bai had been thinking about her parents more as she raised her own children, wondering if time had softened their disapproval of her marriage to Y. "I want them to meet you," she told Violet, "and our children. I want them to see that I am happy, that I built a good life." They made the journey by train, a luxury they could now afford. San Francisco was bigger and louder than Los Alamos, a bustling city that made Violet feel slightly overwhelmed. But Bai seemed energized by it, pointing out landmarks from her childhood and telling stories about growing up there. Finding her parents took 2 days of asking around the Chinese Quarter. When they finally located the small apartment where her parents lived, Bai stood outside for a long moment, gathering courage. "What if they reject me again?" she asked Violet quietly. "Then we leave and we know we tried," Violet said, taking her hand. "But maybe they will surprise you." Bai knocked, and when the door opened, a woman who looked like an older version of Bai stood there, her eyes widening in shock. "Bai," she whispered. "Hello, Mother," Bai said, her voice trembling. "I brought my family to meet you." What followed was an emotional reunion that left everyone in tears. Bai's parents had not stopped writing because they disapproved. Their letters had simply been going to Bai's old address, and they had never received her updated information. They had thought she was dead, had mourned her for years. "We were so wrong," Bai's mother said through tears. "We should have supported your marriage to Y, should have been there for you. Can you forgive us?" "There is nothing to forgive," Bai said, holding her mother tightly. "We are together now. That is what matters." Violet watched his wife reconnect with her parents, saw her introduce Rose and Thomas to their grandparents, and felt a deep sense of completeness. This was the final piece, the last loose thread being tied off. They stayed in San Francisco for 2 weeks, giving Bai time with her family and her parents time to get to know their grandchildren. Bai's father and Violet developed an unexpected friendship, bonding over their shared love of chess and their fierce pride in Bai's accomplishments. "You are a good man," Bai's father said on their last evening there. "I was wrong to think only a Chinese husband could make my daughter happy. Love does not see race or culture, it just sees the heart. Thank you for taking care of my daughter, for giving her a life full of joy." "She takes care of me just as much as I take care of her," Violet said honestly. "We are partners in every sense of the word." They returned to Los Alamos with promises to write regularly and visit again soon. Bai seemed lighter, happier, as though a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. "Thank you for supporting this trip," she said to Violet as they settled back into their home. "It means everything to me." "You do not have to thank me," Violet said. "Family is important." "I am glad you have yours back." The 1890s brought continued growth and prosperity. Their restaurant became a landmark in Los Alamos, known throughout the territory for its unique cuisine and welcoming atmosphere. Rose and Thomas grew into bright, confident children who seemed unbothered by the occasional prejudice they faced, secure in their parents' love and their own self-worth. In 1895, Bai told Violet she was pregnant again. They were both in their mid-30s now, and this pregnancy was unexpected but welcome. 3 children, Violet marveled. "We are going to need a bigger house." "We already need a bigger house," Bai pointed out. "Rose and Thomas barely fit in their rooms anymore." They built an addition to their house, expanding it to accommodate their growing family. Their 3rd child, another daughter they named Lily, was born in early 1896. She was a quiet baby, content to observe the world with serious dark eyes that reminded Violet of Bai when they had first met. As the century drew to a close, Violet sometimes reflected on the long, strange journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about his father, wishing the old man could have met Bai and their children. He thought about his brother and the ranch in Colorado, wondering what had become of them but not really caring. That life felt like it belonged to a different person entirely. "Do you ever regret it?" Bai asked one night when he mentioned these thoughts. "Leaving everything behind to come here?" "Not for a single second," Violet said firmly. "Every choice I made, every hardship I endured, it all led me to you. How could I regret that?" "I feel the same way," Bai said softly. "Even losing Y, as painful as it was, led me to that street corner where I asked you to buy my ring. Led me to this life, these children, this happiness. I do not believe in fate exactly, but I believe things happen for reasons we cannot always understand." "Spoken like a philosopher," Violet teased gently. "Spoken like someone who has lived long enough to see the patterns," Bai corrected. But she was smiling. In 1900, Rose turned 15 and announced she wanted to become a doctor. It was an ambitious goal for any woman, nearly impossible for one of mixed heritage, but Violet and Bai supported her dream wholeheartedly. "If anyone can do it, you can," Violet told his daughter. "You have your mother's determination and your grandfather's intelligence. The world better watch out." Thomas, at 12, was more interested in business than medicine. He worked at the restaurant after school, showing a natural talent for management that impressed everyone. "He will take over one day," Bai said, watching him handle a difficult customer with surprising skill. "He has your way with people, Violet." "And your head for numbers," Violet added. "He is going to be formidable." Lily, at 4, was still too young to know what she wanted, but she showed signs of artistic talent, always drawing or painting something. The new century brought changes to Los Alamos. The mining industry was beginning to decline, and some people were leaving for better opportunities elsewhere. But Violet and Bai's restaurant remained a constant, a place where people could gather and find good food and friendly service regardless of who they were. "We should expand," Chen suggested in 1902. "Open a second location, maybe in Albuquerque." It was an appealing idea, but ultimately Violet and Bai decided against it. "We have built something special here," Bai said. "I do not want to lose that by spreading ourselves too thin." They did, however, publish a small cookbook featuring Bai's recipes, a project that delighted her and brought in additional income. The cookbook was surprisingly popular, selling throughout New Mexico and even in some places beyond. In 1905, on the anniversary of the day they had met, Violet took Bai back to the spot outside the mercantile where he had first seen her. It was late afternoon, the same time of day, and the light hit the adobe buildings in the same golden way. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Violet asked. "I have not eaten in days. Will you buy my ring?" Bai recited, her voice amused. "Not exactly romantic." "It was to me," Violet said. "It was the beginning of everything. You were so scared and so brave at the same time. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I thought you were going to walk past me like everyone else," Bai admitted. "When you stopped, when you actually looked at me like I was a person and not an inconvenience, I could not believe it. I thought maybe I was hallucinating from hunger." "Best hallucination ever then," Violet joked, and Bai laughed. 23 years, she said, shaking her head in wonder. "We have been together 23 years. Where did the time go?" "Into building this," Violet said, gesturing broadly to encompass not just the town but their entire life together. "Into creating something beautiful out of pain and loss and desperation. I would not change a single moment of it." "Neither would I," Bai said. She took his hand, and they stood there together. Two people who had found each other at their lowest points and built a life filled with love and purpose and joy. Rose left for medical school in 1906, the first in their family to attend university. It was bittersweet watching her go, but Violet and Bai were enormously proud. Thomas took on more responsibility at the restaurant, proving himself capable and innovative. Lily, at 10, was beginning to show interest in cooking like her mother, though she insisted on adding artistic flair to every dish. The years continued their steady march forward. Violet's hair turned gray, and Bai developed laugh lines around her eyes. They were no longer young, but they were content, surrounded by family and friends and a business they had built with their own hands. In 1910, Rose came home for a visit with surprising news. She had fallen in love with a fellow medical student, a young man named Daniel whose family had emigrated from Ireland. "I know it is complicated," she said nervously. "With me being mixed race and him being white, people have opinions." Violet and Bai looked at each other and smiled. "Then people can keep their opinions to themselves," Violet said. "If you love him and he loves you, that is all that matters. We learned that lesson ourselves." Rose's wedding in 1911 was a joyful affair, bringing together people from all walks of life. Violet thought it was a testament to what he and Bai had built, not just a business or a family, but a community that valued love over prejudice. Thomas announced his engagement in 1912 to a Chinese-American woman named Amy, whose family ran a grocery store. The wedding was traditional and beautiful, blending customs from multiple cultures in a way that felt perfectly right for their family. As Violet and Bai entered their 50s, they began to slow down slightly, letting their children take on more of the daily operations of the restaurant. They still came in every day, but more to advise and assist than to run everything themselves. "We earned this rest," Bai said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "After everything we went through, we deserve to enjoy our success." "Absolutely," Violet agreed. He reached over and took her hand, marveling as always at how perfectly it fit in his. "I love you, Bai. I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Bai said, squeezing his hand. "You gave me back my life when I had given up. You showed me that endings can be beginnings, that loss can lead to finding. You are the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Violet corrected gently. "The best decision was asking me to buy your ring. That took courage I am not sure I could have mustered in your position." "Desperation," Bai said. "It was desperation, not courage." "No," Violet said firmly. "It was courage. Desperation would have been giving up. You kept fighting, kept trying, kept believing that somehow, somewhere, someone would help. That is courage." Bai leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was a perfect moment, the kind that made all the struggles worthwhile. The years brought grandchildren. Rose had twin boys in 1913. Thomas and Amy had a daughter in 1914. And Lily, who married a local teacher in 1915, had a son in 1916. Violet and Bai's house was always full of noise and laughter, and the chaos of multiple generations living and loving together. "We did this," Bai said one day, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "We created all of this from nothing but faith and hard work and love." "You created it," Violet said. "I just helped." "No," Bai said firmly, echoing what he had said to her so many years ago. "We created it together. Partners, remember, equal." In 1920, Los Alamos celebrated its 50th anniversary as an incorporated town, and Violet and Bai were honored as pioneering business owners who had helped shape the community. Standing on a stage in front of the whole town, Violet felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for what they represented: proof that love could overcome prejudice, that determination could triumph over adversity. When I came to this town 38 years ago, Violet said in his speech, I was lost and angry and convinced that life had nothing good left to offer me. Then I met a woman who was hungry and desperate, asking strangers to buy her ring so she could eat. I could have walked past her like everyone else did, but I stopped, and that decision changed everything. It gave me a partner, a wife, a family, and a purpose. Bai, thank you for asking me to buy your ring. It was the best question anyone ever asked me, even if the answer was no. The crowd laughed at that, and Bai, sitting in the front row, had tears streaming down her face. She stood and joined him on the stage, and they held hands while the town they had helped build applauded them. As they entered their 60s, Violet and Bai finally stepped back entirely from the daily operations of the restaurant, turning it over to Thomas while they focused on enjoying their remaining years together. They traveled some, visiting Rose in Boston, where she had established a successful medical practice, and spending time in San Francisco with Bai's elderly parents. I never imagined this would be my life, Bai said during one of their trips, as they stood on a San Francisco pier watching the ships come and go. I thought I would live and die in obscurity, maybe remembered by a few people but not really making a mark on the world. You made a mark, Violet said. On me, on our children, on everyone who ever ate at our restaurant or worked with us or saw what we built together. You changed the world, Bai. Maybe not the whole world, but our corner of it. We changed it together, Bai corrected, and Violet smiled because she was right, as usual. In 1925, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a huge party that brought together everyone they had ever known and loved. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, and looking around at all those faces, Violet felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. 40 years, he said to Bai as they danced together, moving slowly to music played by Thomas's son, who had inherited his grandmother's musical talent. We have been together 40 years. Best 40 years of my life, Bai said. Even better than I imagined that first day when you bought me dinner instead of buying my ring. I never did buy that ring, Violet realized suddenly. You still have it, of course, Bai said. It is in the same box with my wedding ring from Y. Both of them represent love and loss and new beginnings. They are precious to me. I am glad you kept them, Violet said. They are part of your story, part of what made you who you are. As the night wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing down, Violet and Bai slipped away to their porch, seeking a moment of quiet together. They sat in their familiar spots, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. You think Y would approve? Violet asked, a question he had never quite dared to voice before. Of us, of what we built. Bai was quiet for a moment, considering. I think he would, she said finally. Y wanted me to be happy, wanted me to live fully. I think he would be glad I found someone who loved me as much as you do, who helped me honor his memory while building something new. Yes, I think he would approve. Good, Violet said, relieved to hear her say it. I always hoped he would. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from decades of knowing each other completely. Violet thought about the road that had brought them here, all the twists and turns, the hardships and triumphs. He thought about the desperate woman asking him to buy her ring and the lonely cowboy who stopped to help. He thought about how easily he could have ridden past, how different both their lives would have been. Thank you, he said suddenly. For what? Bai asked, turning to look at him. For trusting me, Violet said. For taking a chance on a stranger. For building this life with me. For 40 years of love and partnership and joy. For everything, Bai. Thank you for everything. Bai smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip a beat even after all these years. "Thank you for stopping," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing me when others looked away. Thank you for every day since then." They kissed, gentle and sweet, two people who had weathered every storm life threw at them and come through stronger for it. And as they sat together under the New Mexico stars, Violet Sinclair knew that his life had turned out exactly as it was meant to, that every step had led him to this moment, to this woman, to this perfect happiness. The years continued, as years do. Violet and Bai aged gracefully, their love deepening rather than fading. They welcomed more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, their family tree spreading wide and strong. The restaurant thrived under Thomas's management, and later under his children's management. It became an institution, a reminder that love could triumph over hate, that determination could overcome any obstacle. In 1932, when Violet was 76 and Bai was 71, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. It was a quieter affair than their 40th had been, just family and close friends, but no less meaningful. Rose gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes, talking about how her parents had taught her that love knew no boundaries, that courage meant standing up for what was right even when it was hard. "You showed us," Rose said, her voice thick with emotion, "that the measure of a person is not where they come from or what they look like, but how they treat others. You built a life based on respect and partnership and genuine love. You gave us an example to live up to, and we are all better people for it. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for everything you are and everything you taught us." After the party, when everyone had gone home, Violet and Bai returned to their porch one last time. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched over them for 50 years of marriage, 50 years of building and growing and loving. 50 years, Bai marveled. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, Violet said. It was choice. Every day we chose each other. Every day we chose love over fear, hope over despair. That is not luck, that is determination. You are right, Bai said, leaning against him. We chose this, and I would choose it again every single time. I would choose you again and again and again forever. And I would choose you, Violet said. Always and forever I choose you. They sat together as they had so many nights before, two people who had started with nothing but each other and built an empire of love. The wind whispered through the desert sage, carrying stories of all they had accomplished, all the lives they had touched, all the love they had shared. And as the stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time, Violet Sinclair and Bai Jing held hands and knew that their story was complete. Not because it was ending, they had many years left ahead of them, but because they had achieved something rare and precious. A life filled with genuine love, honest partnership, and the deep satisfaction of having made a positive mark on the world. They had taken nothing and made it something beautiful. They had taken desperation and transformed it into hope. They had taken two broken people and made them whole again through the simple act of choosing to see each other's humanity. It was a story that would be told for generations. The story of the Chinese widow and the lone cowboy. The story of a ring that was never sold and a love that could not be bought. It was a story about courage and compassion, about building bridges instead of walls, about the radical act of choosing love when the world offered only hate. And it was a story that ended exactly as it should, with two people who had found each other against all odds, sitting together in the twilight of their lives, still holding hands after 50 years, still in love, still partners in every sense of the word. Still choosing each other, every single day, still building their happily ever after, one moment at a time,